Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Well, first of all, I must tell you, in all honestly, that very often my team, including very junior members in my team, says, Salil, after seeing your work, we never want to be a CEO. And I'm not sure that's a great thing. I told them, I said, that's not a nice thing to tell me because they feel there's a lot of, you have to work very, very hard.
Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of CXO Central. We've been talking to people who are really senior and doing really big things all over the world and bringing their stories, their journeys to you because a lot of people on our channel aspire to become CXOs, CEOs, CMOs, CFOs at some point of time in their careers. And we're trying to bring to them what is it that it takes to become a CXO, what are their journeys like. It gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce someone who I've known personally and who has had a impact on me very early in my career. I would like to introduce Mr. Salil Sadanandan, who we have on the call with us. Salil is the president for South Asia and EMEA for Kohler. In the past, he's worked for companies like HT, where I met him at Timex, at Whirlpool, Gillette, and Lentas. Salil is a grad from IIM Ahmedabad, and before that, he did his engineering from IIT Roorkee. Salil, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Kunj. Absolute pleasure to meet you after what now? About 9 years.
From here, and I'll be honest, okay, I was there when you left the company, and then I got to know that you've joined Kohler, and I'm like, why is Salil gone and joined Kohler? Matlab, he was in Hindustan Times. Of course, I was a newbie and I didn't know the world enough.
Right.
Even in terms of category, I mean, you are in a media company, you are heading a big branch, and from there you're going into bath fittings.
Okay, so in fact, there were a lot of jokes around that in my
Hmm,
farewell. I
I'm
remember
sure.
my head of marketing starting and saying, "So, Salil, finally your career is going down the toilet zone." So I had to, I had to handle a lot of that, including from my journalist friends who would stop me on the corridor, and I would have to indulge some toilet humor with them. But to begin with, I wasn't looking for a change. I was actually enjoying
Hmm,
what I was doing, despite knowing fully well that this industry is going to be reconfigured sooner than later. It is coming.
hmm,
I was enjoying it. It was such a inspiring. But Kohler has a very, I would say, intriguing recruitment process. It's a very long-winded one. And I remember finally asking Laura Kohler, who is one of the family members and is our
hmm.
global HR head. I said, Laura, are you hiring me for Kohler, or is it a front for hiring in a CIA? Because in which case I'm going to join tomorrow. So they had a very long, I met an industrial psychologist whose life I think I ruined over that half an hour. There were interesting tests that I had to do, which I hadn't done after my CAT
What was the
exam.
most weird answer you gave to the industrial psychologist?
I don't recollect, but I could see that he was quite stressed at the end of it all. So I think I ended up traumatizing him. And he was a gentleman based out of the Midwest in US. The time zones were crazy, but I made it through that. And I think he was most perplexed that I was working for a newspaper company. And I had to tell him that this is somewhat akin to working for Washington Post. And that was a hard thing to convince them that why
Right.
have you, after these blue chip MNCs, joined a newspaper company that we haven't heard of, because Americans obviously hadn't heard of that. And I was headhunted from a search outfit based out of Chicago.
Right.
So then I was flown to Kohler, and till that point, like I said, I was intrigued with the process, and they had this Kohler Design Center. Kohler is by the way, the village of Kohler is the town where the head office is. It is
Right.
named Kohler. It's a beautiful little town, just 2,000 people. And I went to this design center, and I was just dumbstruck by the beauty of the products that were at display. And I never thought that a faucet or a basin or a toilet could be really so stunning. Then I, of course, met the Kohler family who are inspirational. I met all of them, in fact, right up to the chairman, Mr. Kohler, who is now 86, sharp as
Hmm,
nails.
hmm.
I told his son, David Kohler, that I think of him as the Steve Jobs of toilets. And David said, that's a very nice thing to say, Salil, but never tell my father that, because he thinks Steve Jobs is the Herb Kohler of technology. So there was the challenge of coming into a category which is not very developed, a global leader, but a challenger in the Indian market construct. and again do something completely different. Very new category, very new ecosystem, absolutely different go to market. That sort of got excited. That is what excited me, and I then took up the role, and I have not regretted it for the last 9 years. And today, I don't just look after India; I look after South Asia, Africa, and Middle East. Theoretically, I look after 50 odd countries. Where
Right.
do you get that opportunity of traveling and understanding those cultures and working with different people around the world? And Egypt is different from Kenya, is different from India, is different from Saudi Arabia. Great, you learn everything, something new every day, which is one of the reasons I've stuck here for 9 years now. It is 2 times the tenure I have spent in any other company in my career.
That is why that concern where I started off saying that why go to bath fittings and why, and hence all the toilet humor as well. Do you think you have a certain passion for bath fitting products or kitchen products, for example, or what is it that drove you to take up Kohler, apart from the culture and apart from what they apart from their design philosophy? You are coming from a very patently Indian culture where this is not a high involvement product. So how did you approach?
So I mean, the answer is part of what you just said. It's a challenge of making it a higher engagement category. Actually, Indians spend most, particularly up in the north, on something outside the house, which is your vehicle. That's where you focus. And now increasingly what you carry in your hand, which is mobile. You tend to spend more on what is visible. And you're right about inside the house. Once you bought the house, that is,
Right.
you spend more. But that's a challenge, right? I need people. Tell me today, in today's world, where is it that you get your maximum privacy? Where is it that you're away from the world? And all research tells you that question.
Right.
About an hour that you spend in the bathroom every day. It doesn't matter what state your bathroom is. So increasingly, it is very latent. But people like us, brands like us, are driving that. Let me tell you a very interesting anecdote. One of the things I started was a sort of a deep U&A every 2 or 3 years to understand what's going on in terms of trends. Where does the bathroom figure in the perspective of people? And when we used to do earlier U&A, we used to photograph the bathrooms that people had.
Right.
The change today, when we are doing the photograph, they want to be part of the picture.
I was at Goa airport once upon a time.
There you go. Yeah.
And
What
I
you've done in
landed,
Goa
and
airport.
Goa airport in itself is stuck in a time warp. Everything is it looks like a government office over there. And you suddenly see this
Except the washroom.
tiny thing, which is the Kohler washroom.
Right.
And you are just amazed that such a thing exists. And a toilet, a public toilet can look like this. I
Right.
was just floored because I had no intuition. I had no idea that this kind of a thing existed. And I just walked into it, and it was like, wow, what are the things that are happening? The other time this happened when I walked into a bathroom was in Japan, where they have all these fancy contraptions and all that in a bathroom.
Right.
But this, I never expected it to happen in India, and that too in a public toilet in a Goa airport kind of a place. So
right.
Tell me about what are some of these innovations that you guys are up to, and what is the driving force behind it?
So I'll come to the product innovations last, which are also very important. But the Goa is a high investment thing that we're doing. Exactly the stimuli to which you have responded with the kind of feedback we've got digitally on that. People have said the best thing once you land in Goa is the Kohler washroom. I mean, wouldn't you want to hear that? And these are well-known people who have on their own sort of tweeted or put on their Instagram. Somebody wrote, some gentleman who came from outside wrote that this is the best washroom in all the airports that he has ever visited around the world. And frankly, after that, if you come back to your house, we want that thought to remain, saying that why is my bathroom so boring? Why is my bathroom at best white and steel? Where is the color? Where is the creativity? Where are those astonishing products and product designs and features? Similarly, we have created 2 experience centers, one in Bombay, one in Delhi. The Bombay one is a 16,500 standalone thing in Shakti Mills, beautifully designed with a 30-foot ceiling. And here is the funny thing about it: we don't sell there. Can you imagine the money that we are spending on rental and doing the place? We don't sell, because we want people to come there, architects and designers and end consumers to come there and say, this is the kind of bathroom I want at home. So that is the kind of big thinking that we bring into this industry. It will take time, but somebody like you has perhaps for the first time noticed what a bathroom can be.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that for me, that's a win. I'm so happy. I'm going to post this conversation. I'm going to write a mail to the team saying
Right.
that I'm so proud of what you guys have done. So one is doing things like that. The second is that really the kind of products that we are bringing. We are today, you talked about Japanese toilets, but we are the world's first company to have a fully connected bathroom. It's entirely voice activated. Now, I'm not part of a generation where having the only conversation partner I can get is a faucet, but the world is changing. Everybody is looking at connected devices. Voice is the next best thing, and you can walk in and you don't have to touch anything.
Right.
Increasingly relevant in today's obsession for health. Everything is hands-free. You can get the amount of water you want from a tap by just speaking to it. It has real functional uses, and you get a wealth of data. So we are titillating people like you and our end consumers and the design fraternity with technology, with great design, and with playfulness of material.
Right.
We don't use conventional material for making our products. While you have metal and ceramic, we have brass and we have bronze and we have steel and we have glass. We have basins made of blown glass. We have a range called Artist Edition, where we basically been inspired by art and culture around the world.
Right.
And you're going to see the first India art inspired product that is coming in. So we are beginning to change the narrative when it comes to the bathroom.
How did the movement to Braun appliances and to Gillette happen? What were the things that you were looking for at that stage?
Like I said, I realized that I'm looking at the business world with one lens. It was an exciting lens, no doubt, but after 5 years, I needed to learn new things and get a little more into the depth of, let's say, marketing. And more importantly, I also wanted to do roll up my sleeves and get into field sales.
Right.
So that's what was prompting me to come back to more of a regular business marketing company, marketing oblique manufacturing company. That's what drove me. And, I worked for Braun actually. Braun used to be part of Gillette, then Braun Appliances.
Right.
It's a legendary brand because it created benchmarks in product design. Steve Jobs' product design hero was Dieter Rams, who was the industrial designer for Braun. So if you look at some of the Apple products, starting with the iPod, there is a stark resemblance to the Braun small appliances of the past. So that I thought was pretty exciting. And of course, I wanted to be in the business side of things.
What were some of the interesting things, specific campaigns that you ran or specific insights that you generated for the target consumer?
The exciting part of that job was that we were launching pretty much in that time new concepts into the Indian market. I was part of the launch of epilator for ladies, a hair removal product called Silk Apple. A new category, unusual category, not grooming and beauty in general was not as developed as it is now. And within that, to bring in absolutely new concept of hair removal. So that was one. We launched a range of hair styling and hair drying products. Most of these are, ahead of its time.
Right.
Thirdly, we brought in a range of men's electric shavers and beard trimmers. You could do with one, Kunj. Again, it is a little ahead of the time today. Particularly last year, the world went out and particularly men went out and bought electric shavers and trimmers. So did I, because I needed to do a haircut on my own. So very new concept. So very exciting to try and penetrate that market. I'll just share a couple of examples.
Yeah.
One from inside perspective, the other from a go-to-market perspective. So we started off by selling a product like Silk Apple through the hardware and appliance store, because that's where small appliances are sold. Store where you sell mixies and other small appliances.
Wow.
But it is, right. That's how it started, because that is what the business model was, and that is what we were core to that company. But the truth is that it's a cosmetic, reasonably intimate product for women. You can't really imagine a lady walking into an electric appliance store and buying an epilator or even trying it there. So we said, no, we got to think of ourselves as a cosmetic brand. and the way we designed the packaging, the way the communication was done,
Hmm.
all brought in the fact that it was a cosmetic personal care beauty product. So
Right.
one of the things that we did, I think, was to really break through the cosmetic store chain, the
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
stores which have Lakme, etc. being sold.
Right.
And we would have a lady promoter there. It was difficult to get in because they are not used to selling
Yeah.
appliances.
Yeah.
Product is the warranty. So I thought that was a great go-to-market model that we created and insightful, and it immediately made a difference to the sale because that's where our audience was going. That's where the audience was comfortable, and it was put in the context of cosmetics rather than women thinking, "Hey, this is an electric product. Should I be putting it on my
Right.
skin?" The second really quirky insight, we struggled with the men shaver segment. We
Hmm.
try to sell it as a occasional use 5 o'clock shadow product, right? Work hard, then you're going to go for a party in the evening.
Right.
In transit, you use to remove your 5 o'clock
Hmm.
shadow. So it sold a little bit. So one of the barriers we figured that men did not adopt very quickly to this model is really interesting. They believed that wet shaving lightens their skin because the blade goes through the thing, whereas the electric shaver is just trimming, it's surface
Right.
cleaning, and therefore the skin will darken. That was a crazy insight for me that men were obsessed about how light or dark the skin
Right.
is. 5 6 years later, cosmetic companies saw that insight and brought in products for
Fair and
male
handsome and
fairness.
those
It's
kind of.
crazy.
Right.
It's something that never occurred to me. It's just
Right.
deep research that brought to light that what I thought was astounding insight never occurred to me.
Right. Salil, you mentioned that you started approaching it as a cosmetics product rather than it being an electrical product. Now the thing is that a lot of cosmetics product are promoted, or the way the brand is managed is that you have to first build an insecurity for it. There may be a need, but it is not expressed often, and then the brands do the job of actually expressing it for the first time, saying that guys, this is a need you have. So did you feel any kind of ambiguity, moral ambiguity, when you were doing it? How did you overcome that? How did you handle that?
In our case, we did not pitch the product like that. It
Hmm.
was focused on hair removal. When you go to wax, your hair has to be a certain length, etc.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
with this product, you don't have to wait. So I think we brought in a lot more convenience, and we didn't really prey on the insecurity. It was already
Right.
women are already doing it. We just brought in a very easy, very convenient product. So I did not have any of those moral dilemmas really.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I'm not against the beauty care, personal care
Hmm.
industry per se. It's about how you approach it.
Salil, early in my career, and especially in HT where you were there, I got this advice from a lot of seniors that if you want to one day run a business, then you need to be doing a sales role soon, right?
Right.
Now, when you decided that you don't want to be a specialist, you want to be a generalist, was that with a view that I want to be a CEO one day, or was that just ke mujhe variety chahiye? What was it like?
I don't think I had that ambition laid out that 5 year, 10 year, what I
Hmm.
wanted to be. So I'm not sure that at that point of time I had decided that I wanted to be a general manager or a CEO.
Right.
That happened, I think, after Whirlpool. That's when I started making some quick changes to make sure that I got the relevant exposure and scale. But it fundamentally, I did want to understand as many triggers of the business hands-on as I could. And fundamentally, I do believe sales is a very important part of doing business, whether you're
Right.
setting up on your own or you're working in a company. And the fundamental insights that you get about business come from staying close to the customer. That's really customer service and sales. And I did not want to ignore that. You can be the brightest person in the company. You would have gone to the best
Right.
institutes, but that hands-on experience of dealing
Hmm.
with your channel partners, with your customers, interacting with your consumers, I think really gives you an edge when you take business decisions, particularly when you are looking at managing customer or consumer-facing businesses.
Right.
Uh, Even if it is a service and not a product, I think it is very important. And also the second thing sales does is it gives you operational leadership because in
Hmm.
sales you end up leading larger teams. That's an important part of growing up as a leader.
Yes.
It's not that marketing you can't get it, but marketing typically has much smaller teams.
Right.
Sales, you're really having a much larger exposure. And that's a very important step in your growth as a leader, irrespective of whether you're an entrepreneur or you are going to be a CEO in the corporate world. So
Right.
that's pretty much what I think drove me then.
Isn't stress a major feature of sales as well, like compared to a marketing job where your biggest tension is that okay वो मुझे front page jacket मिला कि नहीं कल. Sales comes with a lot of result day, so to speak,
Yeah.
where what you've done in a particular month actually you see the result of it, and it leads to stress and it leads to you constantly being worried. That is the impression that a lot of young students have. What do you have to say about that?
I don't think that is correct at all. I mean, if you take a role seriously, the roles will bring stress. Even if you are
Hmm.
a general manager of finance, there are
Hmm.
stresses of the job.
Right.
The stresses may be varied. If you are saying that a marketing leader doesn't have stress, it's absolutely wrong. There are
Hmm.
many more stresses in the case of marketing as well, because you have to consistently defend what you're doing, because there is no real metric you can necessarily capture the same day. Things are changing now with
Right.
big data and digital and all of that. And more importantly, just think about somebody who's putting together a campaign.
Hmm.
Everybody and the dog has an opinion on what you're doing. So that's not
Right.
easy ambiguity or stress to
Hmm.
capture.
Hmm.
Uh, in sales, if you really like doing sales, it's always a bit of a high. It's like
Hmm.
I sometimes tell my really hardened sales guys, like it's like you're on drug. Imagine last year for a sales guy. Can you imagine
Yeah.
what kind of stress you would have had last year for field sales team? And as a CEO, I'm very, very empathetic to
Hmm.
that. But even in those circumstances, the revised targets, such as they were, if you get to achieve that, kick is still with you. And
Right.
if you're a good marketing person, you feel that kick too, because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, all that you're doing is to really get those numbers home every month,
Right.
every quarter,
Right.
and for the year. It's how you approach it.
It's different when you're working for an agency versus a brand where you're looking at a campaign as something that is going to contribute to the bottom line.
Right.
When you are a marketing person versus in an agency, sometimes the focus becomes what awards I can win and what unique creative work I can do, which is then not connected to the business objectives. Did you see that difference in the different places you worked?
I would say that yes, some of those fascinations exist in every industry, but
Hmm.
if your advertising is not going to deliver the business results such as they are, no award is going to be worthwhile. You're going to
Right.
lose that account ultimately, right? So it is important to produce creative work that uh, that does deliver on what
Right.
is needed. But the excitement of that journey is really about coming up with something that nobody else has thought of, the idea.
Right.
I think it's not really about winning awards. It's about ideating. How can I do it differently and more meaningfully than somebody else? And good marketing people understand that.
Salil, after this, you moved to Timex Watches and you were president there. What was that journey like? Because now you've moved from a pure consumer product to a consumer durables, then again to a product which is again bought not by a household but by an individual. So, how
Right.
does that focus change? What does that change in you? And how do you approach a new job like that at that point of time?
I am excited, in general as a person, I'm always
Hmm.
excited about doing new things and trying something creative and innovative. So just walking into a new industry and there was a challenge there was for me worth it. And that's around the time I also realized that perhaps I need to take a shot at the so-called top job.
Hmm.
I just,
Hmm.
right, I wanted to know how it feels to not just be responsible for the sales target or be responsible for creating that marketing campaign or bringing out that product that is needed, but really be responsible for everything that happens within the company. So, and I got that opportunity with Timex. When I joined them, I joined as vice president of marketing.
Hmm.
A year later, I think, or about 18 months later, I was also managing the sales part of it.
Hmm.
And then I ultimately became president of the company. So I was pretty much managing everything. So it was also driven by that desire to really go for a CXO CEO job.
Right.
The category, and you will notice again that in most cases when I join a company, it's very important for me what the company's legacy is,
Hmm.
particularly when it comes to product. And Timex is actually a legendary brand. It still is. It is, I think, 1854 was when the first Timex watch
Right.
was introduced. Had some legendary advertising lines. Take silicon, keeps on ticking was one of the legendary advertising lines.
Right.
So great product in a time when actually watches were beginning to go out of fashion. So you could argue that I joined them, and the industry per se could be called as beginning to die, right? You could look at
Right.
it. So that was an interesting journey from redefining Timex from being a time-telling device to actually an essential fashion accessory
Right.
and a great gift to give. I thought that was a very interesting way to look at that job, and then of course take the necessary steps in designing those products, changing your entire retail strategies, and of course also looking at how you're going to manufacture the product. Because if you're going to be a fashion industry, you're going to change very quickly. Every
Right.
6 months, you got to have new designs. So
Right.
existing manufacturing and supply chain structures would not work. So we made all those transformations. So that whole transformation was an exciting part of joining that company.
Take us through
Uh,
that, Salil. I want to know a little bit more about retail, because this is also the time when e-commerce has started growing a little bit. And
yeah,
on the other hand, there is the retail is also shifting to organized retail a lot more. The malls are coming up
right.
all over the country. Big shifts happening in how consumers are going shopping. So, how
Right.
does your retail strategy change?
So two things we did. First, the mall culture was already beginning. There were
Right.
malls coming up in all the big cities,
Hmm.
and people were beginning to, it was like spending a day at the mall was becoming part of the socializing culture, right?
Right. Right.
And it was a impulse environment, and we increasingly realized that watches make great impulse gift buying. So a lady who says, I'm going to buy my boyfriend or brother or husband a gift because it's either their birthday or anniversary. For men in those days, what are the gifts you could buy? Yet another shirt,
Right.
right? So we realized in the mall are these brands, garment stores, shoe stores, athletic stores. We had to be there,
Right.
and we designed the store in such a manner that it was sort of eye candy.
Hmm.
Literally, it was
Hmm.
like a candy store, the whole look and feel. And people passing by said, "Hey, hang on, perhaps I could buy a watch." And we had a very interesting range of watches,
Hmm.
specially designed for men, which was sporty, athletic, outdoor,
Hmm.
not very expensive. So at the same price that you would buy yet another shirt for your husband, let's say,
Right.
you're going to give him a very interesting looking watch. So that drove our retailing strategy. And then bringing that agility in the organization, from designing products once in 2 years to designing virtually every 6 months,
Hmm.
and designing for a season or an occasion. Like we would invariably have a Valentine's collection, small collection, brought in quickly, got out quickly.
Right.
It's like what Zara or Mango would do today in
Fast fashion.
accessories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fast fashion. That is what.
Yeah.
So it helped position the category as something that was not utilitarian,
Right.
but essential to the personality that you wanted.
Salil, I want to focus a little bit more on that moment when you made the decision of accepting the president's position. For the first time, you're moving from a place of specialization where you know brand or sales or something to a very general position where there will be stuff that you've never done. For example,
True.
focusing on the
Manufacturing,
product
for
or
example.
focusing on the manufacturing operations around
Right.
it. Now, these are things that you picked up for the first time. So, first is
Right.
that how did you was there any fear when you made that decision? Did you speak to a mentor, or how did you overcome that fear? And then the moment you got into that role, how did you teach yourself these things?
When it happened, obviously I'll be lying if I said that I had no insecurities.
Hmm.
I had very seasoned people managing all these functions, and
Right.
they probably were thinking, okay, sure, he's IITIM, but he's never done this kind of role. Why should I take him seriously? I had a great manager though, who helped me fill those shoes a little more
Hmm.
comfortably. But uh, I think fundamentally, you need to bring in a lot of common sense into what you're doing.
Hmm.
The problem is that we tend to go by books, and the theories and structures that you've been taught. Whereas if you're reasonably smart and you have learned from all the experiences you have, you can bring that common sense into commonsensical approach into everything that you're doing. Of course, you've got to have a deep-seated curiosity for other things.
Right.
If you're just obsessive about the copy that you're creating, then you're not going to go far. If you're interested in how the watch is assembled, what material has gone into it. I have made vendor visits and supplier visits where dials are made
Right.
to understand everything. So when you have a conversation, you're actually adding value to that conversation, and also you're adding value to those teams, because they are not seeing the jobs as just manufacturing. They are seeing a purpose behind it. The
Right.
purpose could be to get that extra bit of share away from Titan, or create a product which nobody else has created. Those are not things that occur naturally to them. They are doing a repetitive job, sometimes. So bringing that purpose is what unites different teams. The second thing is that, as you grow up, you're beginning to deal with a larger number of people, larger
Right.
scales of teams. You have to learn, and that experience has to come into each and every interaction you have, even with new functions. And most people aren't bloody minded. They respect logic and rationale, and they respect facts and opinions which are based on experiences. The last important thing is that you've got to have the right set of talent manning those
Right.
functions. You learn from them. They must know that you are a student, not a manager. If you're interested in what they're doing, and as a rule, I will ask the silliest of questions today. I don't care. Even now in my company, at my age, it's not easy to remember everything. I'll ask some really silly question of a junior product manager, which they may think is silly, but you have got to ask. You got to be genuinely curious about what's going on in their side of things, and you will see how people open up. And they want also to share their ideas, and
Right. They want to be heard. They want to be seen.
they want to be heard, and they want genuine enthusiasm from the audience.
Right.
And
right.
if you have that curiosity, if you have that interest and deeper understanding of what the company is doing, you will normally, mostly, you will get people who want to work with you, work for you, support you, etc. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm not denying that. It's never a bed of roses. So I think you've got to bring that that sense of purpose and your experiences of managing people into every little interaction that you have.
Right.
That is how you win over and persuade people.
Salil, you mentioned about Timex that at that time when you joined, watches were on their way out in terms of technology and all that. And I feel like you sort of loved that romance around it, because after that you joined an industry that was that everybody was predicting is on its way out.
Yes.
You joined the newspaper industry of all things in the world. You joined Hindustan Times. What was that decision like? To join an industry, also to join a product which has a life of its own. Every morning you wake up to a new product that is being offered. It's not like your Kohler bath fitting, which will at least stay the same for a year. If you've launched a range, that's what it will stay for a year. Every morning there is a new product in your hand. So what was that like? How did you make that decision? And also, if your time at Whirlpool played a role, whatever reputation you built at Whirlpool, if it played a role in you being offered this job, take us through that as well.
Those days, my day was never complete without reading a newspaper. I had to read it cover to cover, and Sunday I would have 4 newspapers reading everything, from page 1 to page. And sadly, I don't read newspapers anymore. But that is how I was brought up. But it was not about that. I already realized that perhaps in the future newspapers as they existed then are not going to be material, and we can see that now. But it was really the challenge there. In fact, I remember telling Rajiv that, listen, if you have a role in Bombay, because I wanted to go back to Bombay. I'm a Bombay boy. I wanted to go back and work in Bombay. Then talk to me. And Rajiv must have saying, oh my God, I've got this sucker who wants to go to Bombay. Whereas he was actually just having a conversation with me about getting on the HD bandwagon. And we had a bunch of really great leaders there. You know many of them. So he said, okay, let's talk about that. And I realized the challenge there, a number 5 brand literally in the lion's den, as it were, or the old ladies' den, to be more appropriate. I mean, when do you get that kind of challenge. It was in a way a once in a lifetime challenge. So that
Sorry,
excited me.
I'm going to interject here, and I'm going to clarify who Salil is referring to when he says lion/old lady. He's referring to Times of India. Times of India is Mumbai's biggest newspaper. Has been for decades.
Kingdom Come.
Similarly, HT has been Delhi's newspaper, has been for decades. Times of India entered the Delhi market, and HT within a few years entered the Bombay market, and it was an amazing time. I would love to tell that story to the audience at some point of time in the
Yeah.
future. That entire Times of India versus Hindustan Times war of the late 90s and early 2000s, uh, first decade of 2000. So we'll
First
do
decade.
that. But Salil, I just thought that I should mention that here.
Yeah, I know. So that, you see the excitement with which you're speaking. That's the
Yes,
excitement that
yes,
got me into that hot seat, and it was a great business. I'll only correct you though. It's the product did not change every day because the product was not the newspaper. That's one of the
hmm.
things that I learned very quickly. The
Right,
product is basically the audience you're selling, because your target consumer is not really the reader; it is the advertiser. And I really, I got that, and I really struggled to convince everybody, saying that, hang on, I'm not saying therefore you make a poor quality newspaper, but you must remember what you are in business for. So it was really about selling that product, and that product of which is the audience, the quality and size of the audience,
right,
and therefore getting share of the advertising penny. And the interesting thing about that industry is that there is a premium that leadership has, which you don't see in other markets.
right.
In soaps, the leader doesn't necessarily have a market share which is higher because it's a leader. But in the media industry, the leader gets a very high premium
Right.
on, let's say, the spot rate or the advertising rate.
Yeah. So I just want to clarify again here, Salil. You spoke about how this is a product for the advertiser. Your target audience is the advertiser and not the reader. So
Right.
why are you saying that? So my understanding is that it takes 15 bucks to print a newspaper, and we sell it at what, 2 rupees, 3 rupees,
Right.
maybe 5 rupees now. So then where do we make the profit?
Basically, your target customer is the one that gives you the money. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And your revenue came out of advertisers, not readers. So that doesn't mean I'm not there for saying you make a crappy newspaper, but your product,
Right.
the product that you're selling that got you the revenue, was really the quality and scale of your audience, which is
Right.
where Times was such a dominating force, as HT was and is still in the National Capital Region.
Right.
So, it is actually, if you look at it, it's a very tight cerebral challenge
Right.
to come in there, question all your understanding of conventional marketing, and turn this business around, not only materially, but also from its position in the marketplace. I did think, despite the fact that the industry perhaps at that point of time did not have the kind of bright future one would
Right.
imagine, I still thought it was a once in a lifetime challenge.
I want to talk about your role, your larger role. Now, you said you yourself mentioned that you handle probably around 50 countries, right?
Right.
How does leadership change from country to country? How does communication change from country to country? How do you understand that? You look at India, there are like 500 types of consumer types within this country itself. Now you add the
Right.
complexity of handling an Egypt and a Saudi Arabia into it. They come with their own complexities, which are born out of their histories, their cultures, their lived experiences as a country. How do you adapt to these things? How do you learn these things? Or do you not learn it and you keep a distance from it and hire just the best guys? How do you do it?
No, I'm interested in learning it.
Hmm.
You can always manage with great leaders, but I'm personally very curious. I want to learn. As I was growing up, one of the things that I wanted to do was grow up and see the world.
Hmm.
Now I'm doing it, and I'm regretting it because 200 days a year I'm out of home.
Right.
But I have this curiosity to understand cultures and people, and you gotta be aware. You can't depend on somebody else.
How do you learn? So, for example, you say that okay, Egypt market is facing a challenge. For example, I need to understand the consumer. I need to sit with the team and figure out how can we fix that market. So, what do you do then?
So first of all, as a person, I'm a reader, so I read up a lot,
Hmm.
including history of the place, etc. Just because I love that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I do a lot of that reading. Of course, you know me, I'm a foodie, so I also
Yeah.
try and understand what the food cultures are.
Hmm.
That is one of the exciting parts about my job.
Right.
The one thing I always do in a new market is 80% of my initial period is just focused on meeting customers, whether they are distributors or dealers, whether they are developers or end consumers, going into the marketplaces. I spend really 80% of my time uh, there, and I don't want to go in and do reviews. Reviews, if you ask me, should be less than 10% of my time there. Because that's where you learn, and you're spending time with the teams, understanding how they live their lives, what makes them tick.
Right.
So that's important. You got to be, and not for me. The advantage is that I'm naturally curious about these things, so that helps. But if you're not, that has to be the starting point.
Right.
Because some of the things that we do or we speak in India are not either acceptable or understandable or comprehensible in markets like South Africa or the Middle East. So
Right.
you got to be aware of that. And but fundamentally, people still work the same way. They will look at what value are you adding. Are you coming in and having a conversation with humility? Are you going to drive your own cultural agenda?
We are running this property called CXO Central, and we get so many students who want to become CXOs very soon. They are all in a hurry. The moment they graduate, they want to become CXOs within 2 years. And this feeling of awe, right, that some of the CXOs exude, it's not something that comes with the designation. It's something that comes with how they conduct themselves and how you feel that you're going to get to learn something from them and all those sorts of things, right? Or even knowing their journey, that the kind of things they've achieved. Do you, as a CXO, work towards building that kind of a feeling, or how do you inspire that kind of feeling in people? Because when you say all these things about David and Goliath, and we're going to take that competitor down or anything of that sort, you have to inspire an entire organization to be able to align to those goals. So how do you build that kind of an aura around yourself?
Well, first of all, I must tell you, in all honestly, that very often my team, including very junior members in my team, says, Salil, after seeing you work, we never want to be a CEO. And I'm not sure that's a great thing. I told them, I said, that's not a nice thing to tell me, because they feel there's a lot of, you have to work very, very hard.
Right.
But that's feedback I'm taking seriously. I'm not clearly a great endorser for a CXO or a CEO, and I have to correct it. I think one of the most important things, any leader, it doesn't have to be CEO or a CXO, it's more important at that level. I think you got to have empathy. It is a very misunderstood term. Very often, most people, even the really literate ones, confuse empathy with sympathy. Empathy is not about somebody going through a hard time and you put an arm around the shoulder and say they're there. That's not empathy. Empathy is about being your ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes. It doesn't matter who that person is. The person could be a customer or a consumer or your manager. Or somebody really junior in an organization. Until you do it, you cannot be a great leader. In fact, the only way, for people who are in marketing and who keep abusing that word insight for a piece of information or a data, they'll call it insight, which offends me to no end. I think insights will come if you have empathy. Do you understand what your consumers are going through? I think that's very, very important. And people, I think, relate to that. And I would say for all the young people who are perhaps going to listen and understand the true meaning of that word empathy and what it means. It will make you a better marketer. It will make you a better salesperson. It will certainly make you a better general manager, because you'll be managing a large heterogeneous number of people. And certainly, if you want to be a great result-oriented, successful CEO, CXO, you have to develop that empathy.
All right. Thanks a lot, Salil. This has been a lot of fun. Lots of things, not just to reminisce about, but also to look forward to for me personally as well. This has been a lesson for me also. Thank you so much for your time. One thing that I'm going to definitely take away from this, and I wish the audience also takes away from this, is this idea of curiosity. This unending curiosity that Salil has shown in his career, as far as learning new functions is concerned, getting into new businesses is concerned, capturing new markets is concerned, picking up new products is concerned, or getting to know new people is concerned. Salil has shown curiosity, and that's at the center of his journey as a CEO. Thank you so much, Salil, for your time. Really appreciate it. I had a great time.
No, thank you for the opportunity, Quint. It was really a pleasure talking to you.